stuff.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry that we are a bit late this time, but I think we managed with only 1 minute. So we had some technical difficulties today with the audio, but I think we will have pretty nice session anyways today. And today we are talking about REST and RESTful services and how you can consume those from Java applications. And kind of as an example application, we have a simple Vaadin application that integrates into Salesforce services that you have created there at the Salesforce. And why we have this actual kind of a Salesforce theme here is because we have my friend from Salesforce, René, and René is working on as a developer evangelist like I am in Salesforce. And we decided to do something together. And actually why we decided to do this REST thing is that REST is quite kind of high-profile topic at the moment. There are lots of like microservices built, and people will need to consume those in other applications and build UIs for microservices or just some bigger REST services. And that's just thing that people need to do. So we are going to cover just like consuming those in Java applications, and then about authorization and authentication to this kind of web services, and then some Salesforce specific stuff as kind of an example case today. So René, so tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you end up on Salesforce?
Hi, Adol. Great joining you in the webinar, Matti.
Thank you.
First time with you. I think after we initially met 2 years ago, before I joined Salesforce.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Right. So I think it would be best that I share a few slides with you.
Yeah.
Just sure. That I can give an introduction about who I am, and for those who don't know Salesforce and our platform, that you can learn about that. So I will share my screen. Okay, so first of all, my name is René Winkelmeyer. I'm a senior developer evangelist with Salesforce, working in the European region with a focus on the German-speaking market. And I joined Salesforce in May this year. And before that, I worked for quite some time with Vaadin in my prior engagement, and that was also a reason why I thought it would make sense in this case to showcase how to integrate Salesforce into Vaadin.
Yeah, this was actually very nice this time, preparations for this Vaadin webinar, because I didn't need to do all the Vaadin code, so you did kind of major part of the Vaadin code for today's webinar example. So typically, I'm the only one who does the Vaadin coding, and then the guest is doing all the kind of integration stuff. But this time you did almost everything.
Well, sometimes it goes that way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'm working for a public credit company, so I have to put in the forward-looking statement, the safe harbor. So make any buying decisions based only on the products that are available from Salesforce, and maybe not on the stuff that you see in this webinar. So the usual thing. So what is Salesforce, and what is the Salesforce App Cloud? Salesforce is often seen as a CRM offering, but that's much more. It is a broad set of products, like, in example, our Sales Cloud Einstein, Service Cloud Einstein, Marketing Cloud, or IoT Cloud. So as you can see just here, it's a set of 8 different clouds baked by one underpinning platform, Force.com or the App Cloud. As you can see, we are offering everything from a no-code development environment to a full-code development environment. That goes from visual builders for workflows in the no-code area, up to our own frameworks to access a platform via any mobile device, up to IoT or AI using Salesforce Einstein. So quite a broad set. And when I say a broad set, I mean a broad set. It is probably quite overwhelming what you see here, and when you get the slides or the video afterwards, just check out all the different points. We have everything for the platform, be it source-driven development via Salesforce DX, ad management, our PaaS offering Heroku, or programmatic or declarative development options. But as integration is key nowadays, the platform has, as you can see on the right side, a broad set of integration capabilities. Be it via SOAP.
Yeah, and REST is not the only one, and actually it's not necessarily the kind of the easiest way to integrate with Vaadin applications, I think.
It just depends, right? As you can see, we support Node, Ruby, Python, Java, PHP, and it's a taste, right? Every developer has his own preference nowadays. An example at the bottom, the streaming API is a pub sub offering that we have based on Comet D. And SOAP API, I think that's the oldest one, BPM style.
And pretty easy with Java especially.
Totally.
Yeah.
So in this webinar, we're going with the REST API to do that. You will hear throughout the webinar, mostly from me, a few words. So I thought it makes sense to put them into here. When we speak about the Arc, it is your own Salesforce instance. That means when you run Salesforce, and it is a complete cloud offering, and you get the account or your own edition. We call that in all our documentation and everywhere an Arc. It's the short for organization. When we talk about an object, and you will see that later in the code, an object is basically like a database table, right? You can get predefined objects, an example when you have the Sales Cloud offering for opportunities, leads, accounts, and so forth. Or you can create your own objects, and that could be a car, that could be a point of interest, that could be basically anything. You can read the data from Salesforce via SOQL. SOQL is our own Salesforce object query language. It is pretty similar to SQL. So if you ever wrote a single query in SQL, you can just adapt that. And the most important part is, I think, metadata. So metadata is basically data that describes data. And you will see that in a few seconds when I show you a basic REST call on our platform before we dig into the code. And we describe everything. That means when we have an object, let's call it opportunity, and that has 15 fields, then you can query what fields this object has and what the properties are. And that makes it really powerful. So let's switch from this screen to my other screen to show you what we have. So, and Google Hangout screen sharing.
Yeah, that nice little beast.
Yes. Okay, so what you see here is Salesforce Sales Cloud. I'm not going to dig too deep into this. You see basically here a list of data, opportunities, and that's also the data that we will gather later in the code examples. The interesting part for a developer is what data is available and how can I access that. For that, we have our workbench, which is available on workbenchdeveloperforce.com, and that gives you full access to every data that is available in your org. So an example, I'm executing, okay, I just have to log in probably, makes sense. If my touchpad lets me survive, no, right. Now my touchpad lost the connection.
Oh no.
Oh no, it's fine. It's an old one, there we go. That's fine, technique. So as you can see, we have a full description of all our services. And here at the bottom, I'm just making that a bit larger, we have the as objects. That's basically the REST URI to access all objects in your org. It takes a bit because in a standard setting, so when you get your edition, we have a lot of objects predefined. So I'm just taking into account a really easy or often used object where you can store contact data for customers. And as you can see, these are all REST properties that you can query. And that is the metadata description that I mentioned. We shouldn't go too deep into this because that would probably take another 2 hours to explain that, but it should just showcase you how powerful the platform is. Having said that, I'm giving back to Matti.
Okay. So about consuming REST services, yeah, I guess that's the kind of the real meat in our application. There are quite a lot of things or ways how you can consume REST services in Java applications. I have actually written one of quite popular article to Vaadin.com, and I think it was published in JAX Center as well, about using JAX errors client, and that's actually kind of my favorite how to do it. And in there, you will practically kind of use more like a high-level API to consume REST services, and then usually you can get any data types with JAX errors client, so you can use plain strings and whatever the responses are, but most often you will use some kind of a model object in Java applications. So that makes it kind of, then you can integrate it with any other tools that you use in Java, like Vaadin UI components, for example. And for that, I always suggest use this awesome service called JSON Schema to Pojo. Of course, if your response type is XML, then you will need to use some other tool to kind of reverse engineer the objects. But if you use here, you can either use JSON Schema, or more often you will just use like a pre-made JSON kind of response that you get from the service, like you would get from the tool that René said. So you could get some example data there and paste it there. And this would actually kind of reverse engineer the model object for you automatically. So you don't need to kind of go manually there and see the JSON type and kind of do all the fields and getters and setters and stuff like that. So this can be most often automated pretty well. And then you can just use the client in JAX errors 2 API, and about JAX errors 2, even if this is like a Java EE standard, you don't need to have a Java EE server to run it. So you can just take normal Java application or normal or plain servlet application, or even use it in a Spring-based tag, because you just need one implementation for it. So there is no need to kind of this kind of contains no dependencies. JAX errors client contains no dependencies to other tools, so it's pretty easy to use it. And most often you will be using Jackson to kind of do the mapping part. So when you are posting new data via JAX errors client or fetching it, and we can say put this article to the webinar chat later on when the webinar is over, so you can look into this article. This is one of the best ways to do it, but sure, it's not the only one. And there are like a lot of different things that you can use. I think, René, you had been using, for example, RESTlet quite often.
In example, RESTlet or HTTP client. Yeah. I think the best ways, and that's how most developers could do it and should do it nowadays, is to check if there is an open source or probably commercial Java library.
Yeah,
you don't want to reinvent the wheel for the 23rd time, and just use the tool that you need for your specific job, right?
Yeah, exactly. So quite many Java developers, when they are consuming these kind of REST services, they actually share the code to GitHub or somewhere, or even to Maven Central, so that you can take just one library and use that kind of to access the REST services. So then you don't need to do all the kind of Java to JSON mapping at all. So you can just take the library and use it. Or in some cases, you still need to do the mapping part, but you can kind of get around with it. Some other ways that you can use still, if you have a Spring stack, then you probably can use REST template, for example. That's kind of a Spring tool for kind of a Spring alternative to Jaxara's 2 client. And then you could use HTTP client, quite popular Java library. And then you could, of course, you can go like really low level and use just URL and open connection and get the data from the server. And you practically don't need any library if you don't want to, but I'd say it's kind of just stupidity to not use these libraries because they will really help you on the way there. And as René said, the best way is kind of to search for the domain-specific library if it exists. And actually, today there is this one library that we will be using. I think it was community built by.
Right. So we're using a Force REST API, which has been built by a community member some time ago already.
Yeah.
Which gives a really easy access to all objects, like object creation, or query objects, all that stuff. So if you don't want to, you don't have to work with the direct REST APIs and just use very easily the third-party Java library, and it's really easy to use.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Maven coordinates for this library was com.frejo and Force REST API. But you can see that from the example project that we will be publishing soon. And
right.
We will show how to use this in our example in a moment. But then one thing that I actually didn't talk about in this REST services article that I wrote a couple of years ago was authentication. So authentication is kind of another kind of hard thing to do in consuming REST services, because quite often those REST services cannot be open for public. For example, in this kind of case with Salesforce account, you wouldn't like to publish all your leads and stuff to the internet, I guess.
Probably not, right?
Yeah.
Except you're hacked, but that's
if you have like an intranet and you have your like microservices there serving different stuff for your application, then in kind of your private cloud, then you can just leave them unauthenticated as well. But most often for the public services, you will need to use some kind of authentication mechanisms. And there are quite many things, or quite many solutions that you can use there. You can actually, for example, use SSL certifications. That would be like a super secure option, but that's not that handy in many cases because you need to share the certification. And for example, you are not using SSL certifications, I guess.
Well, so it depends. I think I prepared a few slides, or we prepared a few slides.
Let's have a look at those
to give a short overview about authentication and authorization in general.
Yeah.
So you should see.
Artyom, can you change the screen? Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So and we take that an example on our platform very serious. Trust is our value number one. So commonly used technologies when you interconnect enterprise applications in general could be, like you said, SSL certificates. We do that also.
Okay. Yeah, you do.
With our platform, if you want that, it all depends on the use cases, right?
Yeah.
You can do session cookies, and what really often is used is SAML, especially in enterprise scenarios, to allow single sign-on across different web-based applications using a single identity provider, so an IDP, which can be an Active Directory, or could be also Salesforce itself, as we can act as an IDP. But in this session, we are focusing, for the sake of simplicity, on the web standard OAuth in version 2.
Yeah, and you will be using this in quite many services, not only in Salesforce. So I have been using it at least in 3 different services that use authentication. It's quite popular. If you need to master one, learn this. I think.
Absolutely. It should be in the basic tool belt of every developer to know and understand OAuth 2, JWT, and all what's behind the specification. That's basic.
Yeah, the bad thing about authentication 2 is that it's not simple. Like in pretty much all security-based things, you have keys and kind of mathematics behind the scenes. So how does authentication actually work?
Okay, so what you see here is a real basic workflow, right? So where a user, an authorization server, and a resource server is involved.
Yeah, so the resource server is the one where the actual data exists, and that's where we want to get the get the actual REST call there.
Absolutely. So what happens is, you will see that later in the web application, is a user, normally an authorized user, wants to access a third party. Third party would be, in this case, Salesforce. He would authenticate himself on Salesforce with his usual user credentials. We would check if and what kind of access is defined in the specific OAuth settings for the third party. And in case of a successful authentication, the authorization server would return a token. That's really important, a token. And based on this token, the third-party application, like our web-based application that runs on Heroku for this webinar, can then access on behalf of the user data in the resource server. What data can be accessed is defined by the settings that the Salesforce administrator, or basically the administrator in general, has defined. What you see here are two different permission sets that have been defined. Like on the left side, very limited information. On the right side, it's a full access setting. If you want to do that in Salesforce, and you can see that on this screen, we have a so-called connected app configuration in our setup, where you can easily define in an administrative interface the used OAuth settings. What I want to highlight are the selected OAuth scopes, because that really defines what kind of data the third-party application can access. Like here, we have only defined API and web access, but it can go down to a full org administration access, which would be normally used in not that many cases. Having said that, I would probably give that microphone back to Matti to now start with code.
Yeah, we could actually start by looking at how you could use this kind of authentication mechanism with Vaadin application, because that's probably the next question for at least half of our audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So would you like to first talk about this application, this example application that we drafted?
Yeah, for sure. So the application that we created is basically a Java application using the Vaadin UI. It offers an authentication mechanism via OAuth to a specific Salesforce org, just one that we have set up for this. And we are going to read some data from different objects, and we'll display that in Vaadin tables and also in a lead map.
Yeah. So basically, we have just like a Gradle build project here. Gradle this time. I'm not that compatible with Gradle. I'm more compatible with Vaadin, but you are. And you can actually, we will share the link afterwards, so you will get a slightly different kind of application, but you can practically take this out and kind of create your own developer environment in Salesforce, and then set the authentication consumer and secret keys, and then practically you can start to play around with this example. So you can practically use this as a basis for playing around with Salesforce APIs. Or just as an example, how you could do a similar similar applications for other services. So for OAuth, we actually used one add-on from Vaadin directory. So it's called Popup, OAuth Popup. So if you go to vaadin.com and directory, and here you can search for OAuth. And it was this add-on, I think, that you were using. So it was
Right.
this authentication 2 add-on. So there is a couple of other add-ons as well that make pretty much the same stuff, but this is using the latest version of Scribe, and that actually contains some of your code as well.
Absolutely. Is Java Scribe library is a quite popular library for providing OAuth authentication mechanisms. And throughout this year, I have added a Salesforce provider.
Yeah, so it's practically this API that we have there, and then you can just kind of connect this pop-up auth opener to just basic Vaadin button, and then if user clicks there, it will kind of redirect you to the authorization server, and that will return a token.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I should still change my font size to be a bit bigger.
One specific thing is here that we also have an instant URL. So that's an optional part in the OAuth 2 specification, that a provider can return custom data.
Okay.
And as Salesforce is a cloud platform and runs in different data centers across the world, we are returning here the instance URL where the specific org belongs to. It could be Europe, or could be in Asia Pacific, could be in the Americas. Right? So we're just using this custom thing, and that's why I also created this custom OAuth provider for Scribe, that we can leverage all the configuration in any Java application.
Yeah, and when we actually kind of get user authenticated in, then we just save this token that we get and actually cast this into Salesforce token, and then at that point we can just create a new API session. And this API session class, this is the one that comes from this third-party library that your community had built. So practically, this is the entry point, this API session, to all the Salesforce APIs that we will be using. So behind the scenes, this library is just using, I think it was using just plain URL open, so it's kind of doing the low-level integration, but it actually provides a support for mapping, so we can actually map the data into domain types that we have created. And in case of Salesforce, these domain types, they cannot be kind of in the library because all people have slightly different kind of tables in their data structures. But we have just used the default ones, and we have here the model object. So we have one for account, and then we have one for opportunity. And in the UI code, where we actually start to get the data, here we can then map easily, for example, to the account object. So let's see how this actually works at the moment. Go to localhost 8080, and if I proceed to Salesforce server, I was actually logged in already, so that's why it didn't ask me. Maybe I could go with the Chrome, or let's quit Chrome and open Chrome again. Then it should kind of forget my session to Salesforce. And go to localhost 8080. So when I open the page, this is the authentication button that we need to click. And if we go there, it will redirect us to Salesforce authentication server. And here I'm granting this application access to the application. If I would be granting it for the first time, it would actually ask me that this application is now requesting permission to get some data from the, I don't remember what all the permissions we were asking, but anyways, now this actual application is started up, and we have just one action here for the simplicity. So now if we click there, okay, I actually hadn't built this. Let's rebuild it. And I think Yeah, reloading server. Let's take it one more time.
Oh, every time. There we go.
Yeah, so there we have the like really raw response that we get from the Salesforce REST API, and this is not the JSON, raw JSON that is actually transferred between the Vaadin UI server and the Salesforce server, but this is just the two-string presentation of the map data that we kind of built here with this query thing. And here you can see this, what was this called? This
SOQL, so Salesforce Object Query Language, where you can basically, it's SQL-like. Select ID and name that are two values that are always available in a Salesforce or in a force.com object, like a unique ID and the name.
Yeah.
And you just pass that through. It uses Jackson in this case to create the Java modules from that.
Yeah, and I can agree that it's really simple to do. I was almost able to do this change there.
Nearly on your own, right? Nearly on your own.
Yeah. So there are a couple of examples here how you can get the data, but let's just take this more advanced query, which actually takes like two tables, not tables, but objects, and kind of does a join there, and then puts all this data into opportunity list of opportunities. But let's not display that in string, but let's create a tabular presentation of that. I will be using Vaadin, of course, because Vaadin 8 is still not out. So in Vaadin 8 we will kind of change the data APIs quite a lot, and it will be awesome. You will all existing Vaadin users will love it.
You're just promoting your own open source project, Matti.
That's actually my job. Yeah, I'm like really enthusiastic about these changes that we have been doing, because this really simplifies like getting started with Vaadin, because previously you needed to work with all these containers and items and properties, and you needed to understand these kind of proprietary terms that we are using in Vaadin. But now you can just kind of take create a table, and then you can just set rows here and take the opportunities that we have, and that's pretty much it. That's kind of the low-level thing that you need to do to get some data to a tabular format. So if I could put it there, table, and then now, if I remember right, I need to build it, and wait a second, so that the server kind of picks up my changes, and then let's try again. So now we have a table there, but actually this is probably not the table that we want to show for our end users. So let's change it a bit and get some data from the account as well. So let's modify the listing a bit. So let's set with properties, we want probably the ID doesn't tell us anything, so we can get name and amount, of course, because we are interested about the amount of the opportunity, and name, amount, and then we could get something like a nested properties from the account. So let's take account state, so we can see where it is, and let's also get account name as well. That should be like much more interesting tabular representation of the data. And build it. Go to here and okay, now it's reloading. Yeah. And go to Salesforce and read the data, and now we can see kind of the table that we actually wanted to show for our business critical.
Hooray!
Yes, but I think you can actually get this kind of presentation from Salesforce, like default UI as well.
Yeah, probably. So what I really like, and that's also a personal preference, is that we have this nested options without really doing inner or outer joins.
Yeah.
Right. That's really neat, and then easy when you have linked objects like to which account does this opportunity belong, that you can just access that via the soccer language.
Yeah. But what do you think? What would be kind of good cases for custom applications to Salesforce data?
So the thing is, when you, and that's my experience with Vaadin applications or enterprise applications, you have lots of apps running in-house, properly grown, and you want to transfer data between the applications. I mean,
that's probably one good case there. So companies always have their internal systems and external systems, and when you want to kind of synchronize, for example, these kind of systems, you might want to create some kind of Vaadin application that has some sort of UI as well, and then kind of synchronizes something from your internal system to Salesforce Cloud or something else. Or,
an example.
Or in the other way around.
An example, both ways, right? As said before, integration is key nowadays.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Or then you could create maybe some kind of a dashboards. So
sure.
If you want to show some customer data in your sales officer's room, so that they will be busy seeing that now there is something happening in California, we need to get there.
So you're just getting to your Chopleth map, right?
yeah. That was actually one thing that actually came to my mind, that these Salesforce default UIs, they actually don't have anything like geographical visualizations for the data. You have pretty kind of advanced graphs that you can build with the default web UI based on the opportunities, but there is no graphical representation that, where should I travel as a salesperson, for example. So that actually kind of brings us in for the more derived solution. So let's build something more exciting than a tabular thing. So we could actually use this same data, and we want to kind of create a map where we have as a key, we have there the names of the states, and as a value, we have the amount of opportunities. So let's create a map with a string as like for the state, and then we have a long for the amount of properties, and call it the state opportunity. Maybe like that. And and to get that, we can kind of just take the response that we had there previously. So opportunities and stream, and then we need to use collectors. So let's collect, and we need to get grouping. So grouping by, and then we want to get collectors counting, and then we need to get the key as well for the state. So that's going to be opportunity and opportunity get account get state, and this should pretty much do it. Okay, so now we have a map with state name as a key and amount of properties as a value, and then we need to have a Vaadin component for map, and for that I'm using actually my own add-on from the same vaadin.com/directory called the Leaflet. The Leaflet is kind of a open source version of Google Maps, so it's very handy tool, and there is a Java-based wrapper for it for Vaadin applications, so you can just use Java to kind of create custom kind of map presentations of whatever data that you have. And actually for this example, I stole one example code from the actual Leaflet project, and there was kind of a ready-made map for presenting this kind of, yeah, here it is. Do you want to try pronounce this Chopleth map? I don't know how you're supposed to say that, but I know what it is. So practically we will use kind of a color. So we will have a darker color for those states that actually have some leads, and then lighter color for those states that there is not. So practically in this class, we will just have one leaflet map. So this is like a composition of Vaadin components. And we read one data structure that contains the US states. And then we create new components, which are actually polygons in this case, and then practically save them in a map and then provide a public API to actually set the values. So here we can call this method to set this state and the value. And because we are losing our time, so I'm gonna steal some code. So we need to kind of practically what we need to do still is just to loop these entries that we collected into this map and call this Chopleth Map API. And then also instead of setting the table, we want to put this Chopleth Map there to the UI. And that's it pretty much. So this is just kind of a bit populistic example how easy it is to kind of do things in Vaadin. You can use your plain Java skills and create new components from existing ones and do the presentation. And in the same way, if you need some kind of a custom UI for saving data, so if there is some kind of more difficult data structure that is kind of nasty to use in the default UI that Salesforce provides, then you can create a customized data input UI for your application as well. So not only visualizing data, but also like kind of showing it. And that's it. That was pretty simple.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is in the Analytics Cloud, Wave, we have also maps. Yeah. But that's not part of the Sales Cloud. So yeah, different product offerings.
Yeah,
as far as a lot. Yes, and that looks good. So Texas is a good place to go, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the area of Mr. Trump. So I would more likely go to maybe New York because there is 10 leads. and naturally, you can kind of pick up some. Like make some interactions here pretty easily. So you could add a click listener that actually does something with these leads. So you could see that, oh, there is lots of leads. So if you click here, it could make a new query or filter the existing data set and show that as a listing. And then you could pick out those leads for more detailed inspection than you can get in this very simple map view.
Right, and when you would run that with your in-house Vaadin application that probably has connections to other data sources in-house.
Yeah, that could combine some data from your own data sources, of course, and there are like lots of different kind of possibilities that you can do with real Java code, not just some. Yeah, we were having some discussion about this. You have some services as well where you can kind of just using browser and no coding do some kind of modifications to the Salesforce UI as well. But of course, if you have a real Java and real programming language, then you can do pretty much everything you can imagine. Yeah, I think we had a couple of questions as well about the subject. At least Ricard was asking that how to integrate Vaadin with a REST service in one project with Spring 4. I'm not completely sure, but I think the question is that how do you publish a REST service from the same VOR application where you have Vaadin UI? I'm not completely sure, but it might be this way. And in this case, you should just kind of map the Vaadin UI away from the root contexts. So instead of mapping Vaadin to / you can map Vaadin UI to, for example, /UI, and then the REST services can also access to the kind of the main servlet that there is in Spring. So that's pretty easy to do, but then you just need to kind of relocate your UI to a different location. And if I misunderstood the question, then you probably mean that how you should consume REST services in Spring 4. And that's definitely using REST template, because that's pretty well integrated in Spring stacks, and it might be already on your class path. So definitely go with REST template with Spring. I'm not sure if you have used Spring that much, so if you have any input for this question, René.
Yeah, partially.
Yeah.
Partially. Spring is a bit ago. My friend Ryan Baxter will kill me. He works for Spring now, but it's some time ago.
Yeah.
Especially as I'm focusing now on the App Cloud. But if you want to go down the route and use Spring with Salesforce, we have a couple of examples available how you just can accomplish that too. We just didn't want to go down that route here in this webinar, because it would take 4 hours to go through everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the way, do you have any Spring Boot examples there?
I think so. I have to check that.
Yeah, because Spring Boot is what I like to use when I'm using Spring. So that's definitely the way to go with Spring applications these days. Then you don't need to do so much configuration that you needed to do with like previous versions of Spring. So much easier to get started. And then there was a question from Kent that will you be talking about single sign-on? So how would you implement single sign-on using a Vaadin application? I guess like a custom-tailored Vaadin application in somewhere, like in your own premises or in Heroku and Salesforce. So
I think that basically depends on what application server the Vaadin application runs. Yeah. As said before, we from Salesforce, support everything by being a consumer for SAML or up to our own identity provider. So if a company, an example, wants to outsource all the authentication, we can handle that up to millions of users. And if you run an example just Tomcat server, you can then point an example to Salesforce to have SAML authentication.
Yeah.
Or the other way around, right? So it just depends, or mainly depends on how you configure the security on the Java server that runs Vaadin.
Yeah, and actually, well, with authentication alone, you kind of have the single sign-on, because as you saw in the example, when I had already logged in with my browser to Salesforce, then getting to, for example, if I reload, Artem, can you show my screen still? So if I reload the application, this will kind of, and I click this button, it will just directly go to the server and directly go back. So kind of the Salesforce server remembers that I have a session there, so it can immediately kind of grant the access. And also you should, if you like do a real application, not just this kind of test application that we had here, you should probably save the token to session, so to a CDI or Spring Bean. And then if you reload a page or create a new tab to your Vaadin application, then it doesn't need to go back to the Salesforce server again and get a new token there, but it can just reuse the same token. But then you should probably be quite careful, because you might end up in a situation if you make a small mistake, the token might kind of leak to another session or even be used globally in your application, and that's probably not what you want.
I mean, the real-world use case or real-world application would mean that to our sample application, you would have a dedicated logon.
Yeah.
Like Matti at demo.com, and after you're authenticated there, then in that application, the specific OAuth token could be stored just for your authenticated user, right? So that would be, we just skip that, because that would open up a new hole of security.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. We have already spent 50 minutes and we were aiming for 40. So So I think we should kind of wrap up from this time. And if you have any questions regarding the REST APIs or integration with Vaadin and Salesforce applications, feel free to post those questions to our forum page where you are probably watching this webinar. And we will be monitoring those questions. And we'll try to get you back on these questions.
Right. So last but not least, resources, right? So that you know where to get that. You can find shortly after the webinar the demo project on GitHub on my user Wimsprager. It's called Vaadin Salesforce REST. And we also have the full live application that the demo project uses, also running on our PaaS offering Heroku.
Yeah.
So that showcases you everything you saw.
Yeah, that's kind of useless unless you have a Salesforce account. I think you need to have it to our server as well.
No, you don't need. So basically, if you want to run the app, you only need a Salesforce Developer Edition. The README in the demo project explains what you need to do. It's just a simple form, and then you can connect with every org to our demo app.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. The only thing that needs to be there is this lead So you cannot change the default data types that there comes with the default developer.
Right. So when one creates a new developer edition, it is already pre-filled with data, so that one can directly start with that. So if one gets demo edition, can just use the demo app and the demo project. Last but not least, if someone wants to learn more about Salesforce, we have TrailApp. You probably saw the theme throughout the whole presentation. It's our online learning platform with already more than 70 developer badges. You will learn about the REST APIs, Heroku, and developer editions, everything you need to know about Salesforce.
Yeah.
Having said that,
I need to get some badges as well.
Well, we started, I think it was May last year. And so in one time here, 1.2 million earned badges is not bad.
Yeah. All right. But that's it for this time. And next week, we will be having a webinar with Spring Folk. So Stefan Nicol will be joining me here at Vaadin Studios, and we will be talking about Spring services, different kind of Spring services, and how to integrate those with Vaadin applications. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.